Now we're going to go to our first candidate. He is the public advocate of New York City. Please welcome Bill de Blasio. Welcome, Bill. So, you've heard the format. You know the groups that are in the room. And I think we're going to begin by giving you a chance just to make an opening statement and introduce yourself to the audience.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being a part of this. Thank you for water. You think of everything. Thank you to the inimitable Justin Krebs for his moderation. To Act Now, to Living Liberally, to DFNYC, thank you for everything you do to make the city more democratic with a small d. So look, I want to make it very straightforward. I think this is a profound choice for this city. We're coming out of 12 years of the Bloomberg regime. It is time for profound change. It's not time for Bloomberg light. It is time for something profoundly different. I am proposing a series of real progressive changes for this city, and I'm doing them in a way that I think really will capture the imaginations of people in this city and speak to their aspirations for this city, for a much more economically fair city. I'm a progressive who I think is in a position to put together a real diverse, multi-borough, multi-ethnic, multi-everything coalition that can win this election. And I'm proud of the kind of campaign we're running that's about progressive values, but also about grassroots organizing. And that's the same way I've gone about all of my campaigns, and that's how I became public advocate. Simple concepts. Economic justice, we have to face income disparity, which is the great crisis of our times. The way we do it is with paid sick days legislation. It's with an expansive use of living wage legislation. It's with real city investments that create jobs and affordable housing. It's about aggressively using all these tools to make profound changes in all 5 boroughs, including every area of all 5 boroughs in terms of jobs and access to jobs for every kind of New Yorker. On education, I have proposed a tax on the wealthiest New Yorkers so we can have absolute universal full-day pre-K for every New York City child who needs it, so we can have after school for every middle school child who needs it. I've talked about ending teaching to the test, ending a test prep-based curriculum, empowering parents and communities all over the city to be a part of education in a way they've just not been allowed to be in the Bloomberg years. And on public safety, I've talked about fundamentally reforming stop and frisk, instituting an inspector general for the police department, bringing in a new police commissioner who's ready to repair some of the damage that's been done to police-community relations so we can have lasting peace and lasting security in the relationship between police and community all over this city. I mentioned paid sick days. Just want to give you an up-to-the-moment report that as of 7 o'clock as this forum began, it has been 2 years, 11 months, 11 days, 5 hours, and 30 minutes since the paid sick day legislation was introduced in the New York City Council. It is an affront to democracy that between Mayor Bloomberg and Speaker Quinn there has not been a vote on paid sick days. This would be one of the most profound changes we could make in this city. And if you go on our website, www.advocate.nyc.gov, you will see a new, exciting, interactive countdown, or count-up clock, actually, showing how long it has been that democracy has been stifled in this city. Even though paid sick days has a supermajority in the City Council, the democratic process is not functioning at the City Council when it comes to this crucial legislation that would affect 1 million New Yorkers and profoundly affect their quality of life and their economic reality. So that's the kind of thing I'll be fighting for now, and that's the kind of thing I want to change as mayor of the city.
Great, thank you. Yeah, you're welcome to applaud. This is can be interactive.
Oh, this is good.
You know, one note, Trey, can we turn the house lights up a little bit? Unlike what we can do as a theater where we try to create the fourth wall, we're going to tear down the fourth wall here. We want our candidates to see when you nod, when you frown, when you cheer, and when you grimace. So thanks, Trey.
I couldn't see the audience at all, Justin.
I know. Now there they are.
I know they're out there
and
somewhere.
They're there, and they're smiling. So, and there's the greater audience on the other side of that camera. Okay, so first question. This connects to some of the things you brought up. What, and this again comes from our audience tonight, what parts of the Bloomberg agenda would you retain? And You've already noted a number of the things you would do to make a difference in the city, to bring progress to the city. What are some of the changes you would change first? There's really two questions, but they both have to do with how you balance this very mixed legacy of our current mayor.
I think the frame I use to talk about this city is a tale of two cities. And that gets to your question, because what's happened, particularly as the Bloomberg years have worn on, the disparities in our city have grown, whether you're, again, talking economically, educationally, or in terms of public safety. And the willingness of the Bloomberg administration to address them and to be in a real dialogue and let the democratic process function has been reducing, most notably when the term limits decision was made in 2008 and since. But in the beginning, to answer your question, the first term had a lot to be admired and a lot that, in fact, should be continued. I think the vast majority of the public health-oriented policies, the smoking ban, the calorie counts, I even supported the recent version of the soda ban because I think the fight against obesity is crucial. A lot of the environmental policies, the work on climate change. I, in fact, think we need to go deeper. I think we have so much more to do in the city on energy retrofits, for example. But I think the impulse of the Bloomberg years was a very good one on the vast majority of environmental areas. Mayoral control of education. I don't like one bit the way it's been utilized. I think it was right to move away from the previous system. I was part of that as a school board member. But I want to see a reformed, more democratized version of mayoral control. But the mayor was right to achieve mayoral control. Certainly the efforts on gun control, the efforts on immigration reform should be continued. So there is a substantial body of work that the next mayor should continue. What would you do in the first days? I would insist on a vote on basic days legislation. I would sign it right away. One of the most profound and fundamental things. I would insist on legislation that would open up the use of living wage policies for projects that the city is subsidizing, as opposed to the bill that passed the city council, which only reached a few hundred workers. I want to see living wage legislation that reaches thousands and thousands of workers. In terms of the schools, right away, I would instruct the first steps towards moving away from a test prep curriculum and teaching to the test. I would propose immediately for the April 2014 Albany budget. I would propose a tax on the wealthiest New Yorkers. That would be a tax by New York City requiring Albany approval. I would propose that so we could get to the work of creating truly universal pre-K and after-school programs. So I've got a very strong agenda. I'll tell you another one. I would ban horse carriages in Central Park the first week on the job. I think it's horrible in terms of what happens to horses. I think it's unnecessary and doesn't do anything for our economy, much to the chagrin of the mayor, who thinks it's the center of our tourism economy. I think there's a lot that needs to be done right away. But I think every candidate should be able to define the pieces of Bloomberg legacy that are worth continuing and the pieces that have to profoundly change, especially in light of the economic inequities that have come up in the last 5 years in this city.
Great. A follow-up on that. I remember 4 years ago when Bill Thompson ran, he was asked, what's the first thing you'll do? And he said, the first thing I'm going to do is fire all the commissioners. Is there any Bloomberg commissioner that you would consider keeping on if you were elected mayor?
I actually have found a good handful of folks in the Bloomberg administration that I've worked with well, and I respect. I don't make any commitments up front on personnel matters, but I'll give you examples. I've worked very well with Dr. Tom Farley, who's the health commissioner, or Matt Wambua, who's the housing commissioner. I have not worked well with the school's chancellors. I think they've been devoted to policies excluding the voices of parents. I think they've been authors of a set of approaches that have divided the administration from teachers. Haven't been happy with the head of the housing authority, John Reed. But there have been some folks in some agencies I think have done quite well in serving our good public service.
So the next question, which is chosen, you commented on this already, comes from our audience. What steps will you take as mayor to increase oversight of the next police commissioner, and decrease civil liberties violations by the NYPD, and record damage awards against the city of New York? Oh, I guess to reduce the damage. So, I mean, obviously you've spoken about the stop and frisk policy a lot in your campaign, but drill down a little bit. What is the role of mayor in oversight of the NYPD, and how would you take hold of that?
The role of the mayor in oversight of the NYPD with the mayor being the person elected and the police commissioner being the person not elected. It very much parallels the theory of the military on the national scale. The chief executive elected by the people is supposed to be the dominant figure. That has not been the case in New York City. Certainly not during the Bloomberg years, but I would argue before that as well. That's why we need an inspector general for the police department. Until we have an inspector general with independence, policies like stop and frisk will continue to plague us. Now, here's a policy that affected hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers negatively and create a rift between police and community, and there was no vote on it, there were no hearings on it, there was no determination that this, use of this tactic was going to proliferate in the way it did. That's why we need an inspector general to actually create some substantial oversight. But as mayor, it's my job also to create oversight over the police department, not to, in fact, passively stand by when some of the wrong things are done. What happened during the Republican convention in 2004 was wrong. What happened at Occupy, and the piece of Occupy that really bothers me the most, was when the site was cleared. The fact that the NYPD did not allow the media to be close enough to record what was happening, which I think was a fundamental violation of basic liberties and basic constitutional values. That's where a mayor needs to step in and tell the police this is how it's going to go. In fact, in the case of that example at Occupy, it was very much supported by City Hall that the media would be excluded. So I think we need a sea change in those approaches. The only way that is going to happen is a mayor willing to look people in the eye and say, there's no dichotomy between protecting civil liberties and enhancing public safety. This concept that both go together. This republic was founded on that concept. I always say this is a country that, from its beginnings, in time of conflict, profoundly bought into the notion that civil liberties are a given, no matter what difficulties surround us in society. In New York City, which is supposed to be the progressive beacon, in 2013, when you question stop and frisk, the New York Post and others will suggest you're soft on crime. That kind of knee-jerk diminishing of the notion of civil liberties has to be fought back. And the constant message I'm going to give to the public is protecting civil liberties is a New York City value, is an American value, and is entirely consistent with public safety.
Right. That answer, when you talk about New York being a progressive beacon, I've heard you speak about this concept before, that the mayor of New York City does have a national platform. It's certainly a platform you've used as public advocate. Given that probably a lot of people in this audience they clearly care about local politics, that's why they're here tonight, but also have a foothold in national politics, where do you see the mayor of New York City's role in furthering that progressive beacon, in amplifying that progressive beacon that you speak about?
Look, I think progressives should be profoundly concerned about this choice, not just to pick up on Justin's framing, not just because of what it means for day-to-day life in New York City, for what it means, like issues for like fighting income inequality in New York City, for example. We should see this as an opportunity to elect someone who can be a spokesman on a whole host of issues and an organizing agent on a whole host of issues that matter around the country, in fact. For many, many years, the mayoralty of New York City was considered a crucial platform, a crucial bully pulpit on behalf of urban America. And you've seen in the Reagan years, in the Gingrich years, this constant undercutting of a set of federal policies that used to be essential to cities, most notably public housing and Section 8 vouchers for affordable housing and funding of mass transit, things that we used to assume were givens, and there was a larger consensus around, and there was a vibrant voice at City Hall defending New York City's interests and cities around the country. We have to return to that. The issue of our times, first and foremost, is economic justice. And the mayor of New York City, again, commending Bloomberg for some of the focus he did take on, gun control, climate change, immigration rights, all to be continued. But the first and foremost responsibility of the mayor of New York City on the national stage is to talk about economic justice and to organize other mayors and governors around a similar platform. What's become clearer and clearer to me is the economic power of state and local government in this country is one of the bulwarks against what we've seen in Washington, including in the time of the Tea Party in Washington. The power of our pension funds and all the other tools we have can do things like fight back against the Citizens United decision, something I've been working on for the last 3 years, using that economic power to constrain corporate America, to ensure things like disclosure of contributions and self-limitations on contribution. And the gun issue, use that public economic power to constrain investments in the guns and ammunitions industry, to constrain the NRA in effect. This is a chance to rework our approach to politics. And I think we haven't assumed that state and local office is the progressive venue, but more and more I think it has to be. And this one being one of the ultimate bully pulpits is so much more important to get right. Again, I believe I'm a progressive who can win this race. I think if we have another variation of Bloomberg, we will never have that kind of spokesperson for progressive values that we need on the national stage coming out of New York City.
Thank you. Just to let everyone know, we're now 15 minutes into our 25 minutes with the public advocate, so I'm keeping us on track and on schedule. And also there are some seats available, so if you want to come in while I'm talking, not while the candidates are talking, because what I have to say is a lot less interesting. Speaking of which, the next question is going to take us from the national back to the very local, and I think you'll appreciate this since probably as a city council member you used to get questions like this all the time. Why is it when I filed for Medicaid, food stamps, and HEAP, I think is the third one? HEAP. I had to go to 3 different places all over Brooklyn. Can this process be consolidated?
Amen.
I'm like, flashbacks to your days as a city council member. I feel like you must have gotten asked this often.
I got asked things like that quite a bit. First, I want to note just one programming note, that there's got to be some metaphor in the wobbly table here.
Right.
I'm trying to figure out what it means. If someone could explain it to me, I'd be very...
Give me a piece of index card. Just an index card.
On the question of how we provide benefits, you know, one of the things I've been fighting for years, you know, we still fingerprint a number of food stamp recipients in this city. People who are struggling to get by and are trying to get food, and we put them through the stigmatizing process of being fingerprinted, something the mayor believes in strongly, by the way. You don't get fingerprinted for a lot of middle-class benefits. But if you want food, you do. So that's something we have to change right there. But on the bigger question of making it simpler to get benefits people deserve, yes, I have been trying for a long time for one-stop shopping in terms of physical locations, but even better to not have to have the physical locations, to be able to do the most possible online and by phone to simplify the process. We want people to get benefits that they deserve writ large. We especially love it when those are federally funded benefits. And that's, again, the other irony of the food stamp issue. Money from the federal government for New York City for food, and yet we're making it harder for people to get it instead of easier. So that whole series of reforms about making benefits simpler is something I want to focus on.
Great. Now, you've spoken a couple times about the need to not continue with a Bloomberg light policy, not to have an extension, yet another extension of the Bloomberg terms. I think something that everyone's going to ask tonight as we see you and the next 3 candidates and the candidates who aren't here is what makes you stand out. Most of the Democrats running are going to be explicitly progressive. We'll probably take broadly the stances you've taken. Why do we believe you can get it done instead of some of the others?
Look, I don't think it's quite as consistent a group philosophically as you might think. I think, look, I know a lot of people in this room care deeply about, you know, national and international issues, and if you look through that prism, it's not like, you know, Democrats versus Republicans or Tea Party versus progressives. We don't have that kind of skew in the Democratic primary, but we have some pretty profound differences. One of them, obviously, is are you willing to tax the rich or not to do some of the things we have to do in this city? I'm willing to do that. I'm not putting people down by saying it, meaning I'm not trying to be derogatory towards those who have done well. I just think we need more help to fix our schools, and we have a school system that's still profoundly unfair to a lot of our kids. And if we don't fix it, we should not be surprised that a lot of young people will not be able to make it in the modern economy, and that we'll continue to have safety and social fabric problems go unaddressed. So I believe it's a totally fair thing to ask the wealthy to do more. Bill Thompson does not agree with that. Chris Quinn does not agree with that. Okay? I believe, I'm going to give you just some examples. Paid sick days. Obviously, I've been fighting for it for a long time. Chris Quinn says in theory she believes in it, but she won't allow a vote on it. I find that a very interesting construct. Bill Thompson, literally just in the last 24 hours, decided he supports paid sick days. It's something I think has been clear for years why we need it. I believe in expansive use of living wage legislation. Chris Quinn chose to water it down to 400 workers. Bill Thompson, I don't think, still has ever come out squarely in favor of living wage. Chris Quinn wants Ray Kelly to continue as police commissioner. I respect Ray Kelly. Ray Kelly's not going to change the NYPD in the ways it needs to be. Ray Kelly's not going to support an inspector general. Ray Kelly's not going to give us a real civilian complaint review board, and he's certainly not going to change the approach to stop and frisk the way it needs to be. And he was one of the authors of what I said troubled me so deeply, which was the removal of folks at Occupy in a manner that excluded the press. So those are some very, very profound differences in terms of where people stand on the issues. But the other thing progressives, of course, have to ask is, you know, one, can the candidate, two things, can a candidate win, and is there some bigger impact of their victory? I believe I can win because I've already won citywide office as public advocate in a very competitive dynamic. Again, proven the ability to create broad, coherent coalitions and put together the kind of turnout operations that every good progressive activist understands are more pertinent than ever in modern politics, and have a message that truly resonates across this electorate, which I will remind you will be 70%, 70% outer borough, and folks who are looking for change from this current status quo. But then the second point is, will there be some bigger vision of change animating the mayoralty? And will there be an expansive idea of how to use the power of the mayoralty to make lasting change? Not just in this city on the kind of issues I've talked about, but again, that also affects the national debate. This is the biggest city in the country. This is the bellwether on so many ways. New York City, New York State have had this extraordinary progressive tradition on economic justice issues until recently. And we must restore it because it must be felt on the national level. I think that's a huge difference and something I've shown already as advocate I can deliver it in a very powerful fashion as mayor.
One final question before you're closing, and then we're out of time for you. But given the correlation between physical activity and academic success in school-age children, how would you protect spaces for physical activity for public school students, which is both a school question that you've talked about, but also can expand and be about our parks, about our livable city, and about the open spaces we create?
Are you leading the witness? But you're right again. Look, I am a public school parent. I have been for 14 years. Both my kids, one has finished with public school, the other is a sophomore in high school. And if elected this November, I will be the first mayor to have a child in public schools while serving as mayor, which to me is a very, very important thing because it's about time that the city government respected public school families in a very, very different manner. I've put as the #1 proposal I've made the tax on the wealthy to give us universal pre-K and after-school programs for every middle school child who needs it. That means I'm saying that is the thing you should assess me by, that's the thing you should judge the administration on. Do we fundamentally change the educational dynamics? The good news to do it is it does have real ramifications for the opportunity of kids to get exercise and wellness in the process, because to have universal pre-K, we're going to need to create more space for pre-K classrooms. We're going to need to create pre-K centers separate from elementary schools, like a single center for several schools in the neighborhood. That's going to open up space in schools. We're going to need to put more of our city capital budget into education. And I think it's an incredibly worthy investment if it allows us, first and foremost, to finally focus on early childhood education, which we just haven't done in this city, but second, in the process to open up also space so that kids actually have phys ed and wellness programs that in many schools in this city, they're effectively deprived of on a regular basis. I think it does obviously spill over into how we make open spaces available for young people as well, but I think the central point is reestablishing in schools phys ed and wellness programs that have been boxed out over recent years. That takes a serious belief that they're a priority and a serious commitment of capital dollars to do it.
All right. Well, you now have, and feel free to applaud when you have something you like. I also like when he was talking about the Reagan years and the Gingrich years, I almost wish there was more of a Purim-like booing, and I wish You know that when you hear Heyman.
This crowd needs to work on its hissing skills.
I know. I mean, if you don't give a Heyman-style hiss.
Can we test the Reagan years and the Gingrich years? Okay, much better. Much
more
better.
Gingrich than Reagan.
Better. Well, Gingrich is a little more current. He almost made his comeback.
Almost. With your final minute,
yes.
Any closing thoughts? Any closing statement you want the members of Democracy for New York City, Act Now, Living Liberally, and other progressive friends to hear?
One phrase I always love is the future is unwritten. And we need to realize that this is an extremely wide open dynamic in this city this year. The people have only just begun to focus on the notion that the Bloomberg years are about to end. I always say that the mayor's State of the City speech a couple of weeks ago could be summarized by the quote from Louis XIV, "Après moi le déluge." The mayor was quite clear that we were all going to go to hell after he left. But in fact, the people, I think, are increasingly saying, wait a minute, we have a choice to make here. And a lot of things they'd like to see happen differently are starting to click in people's minds. And the fact that they actually like a functioning democracy again. They like their citizenship respected, whether it's a parent who wants some say in their local public school or community folks who want some say on the development process. They'd like it to not be my way or the highway anymore. So we as progressives and activists have a chance to actually restore some of the democratic content here in this city. And as for the election itself, I can tell you with, I think, authority, this debate has just begun. The election has not yet been engaged by the people. This is wide, wide open. And it will come down to which candidate has a stronger animating vision of change and who best organizes people to vote. And that's a long way off until we see how that happens. It will be up to people in this room and others like-minded to determine the fate of this election.
Right. Ladies and gentlemen, Bill de Blasio. Thank you, sir. See you soon.
All right.
And again, what website should people go to learn more about you?
This one's going to come as a shocker. JustinKrebs.com. No, it's at BillDeBlasio.com.
Great. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.